The Panthers added a wide receiver on Tuesday, but not one of the big names out there on the market. Does this now signal that Carolina will be looking for a receiver during the draft? We'll talk about that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. And all you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council, or simply just at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council. Then on Friday, I'll be right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. We've been talking a lot about wide receivers here over the last couple of weeks. And I promise I'm not going to come up here on every single show and talk about the wide receiver position. But when you look at what Carolina's done so far during free agency, and we talked about that yesterday on the show, how they've gotten better both on offense and defensively, looking at each and every position. You look at defensive line, you add Turk Wharton, you add Bobby Brown the third. You feel pretty good about Patrick Jones, the second, coming in as an edge rusher to elevate that room. You add in Trevon Moehrig at safety. Each of those position groups have gotten better. Now, how much better has edge rusher gotten? I don't know just yet. I would love to see them address that next month in the draft, but certainly Patrick Jones coming to Carolina can't make them worse than where they were a year ago. And if you just look at it this way, they're going to swap him in there and take DJ Johnson out as far as being the number 3 edge rusher projected right now in Carolina. So he would be an upgrade over someone who right now has not done much to solidify his spot in Carolina heading into his third year here in 2025. So they've gotten better across the board. I think defensively, linebacker could be a question mark, but you look at receiver, Carolina's not really done much to add to that position group. And Dan Morgan was asked about the receivers 3 weeks ago at the Combine, talking about how he loves Xavier Legette. He loves Adam Thielen. He loves Jalen Coker and what each of them provide to Carolina. And he's proven it. They went out there and they traded up to the first round to get Xavier Legette. They were able to beat other teams out for Jalen Coker. And when they let him go, they were able to bring him back after he was cut last August. And they rewarded Adam Thielen for what he's done the last 2 years as de facto number 1. And they gave him a raise this upcoming season. So clearly, Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, Dave Canales, the Panthers front office, coaching staff love the trio that they have there that are projected to start. But I think they also understand that they could get better. And Dan said it. There's a player out there, whether it's going to be drafting or signing, that could improve that group, they would do it. And it's very clear that right now they do not have a number 1 wide receiver. And coincidentally, on the same day where Carolina went out there on Tuesday and announced the signing of David Moore coming back for one more season, that was also the same day up in Cincinnati, the fake Queen City. And I shouldn't even mention them being the Queen City at all because it's complete bull, but they were up there reintroducing Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins and talk about how they both signed their massive extensions. And you all know I wanted Tee Higgins to be here in Carolina. Cincinnati finally, not being a bunch of penny pushers, they finally paid both those guys, which is what Joe Burrow wanted. And apparently they're going to try to find a way to pay Trey Hendrickson. So I'm not sure how the hell they're affording all of this, but they are. And Cincinnati has arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. It's either Chase or his LSU teammate, Justin Jefferson. Doesn't really matter. They're both tremendous and better than literally everybody else in the league. And then there's Tee Higgins, who is a phenomenal talent, and I thought would have fit in very nicely here in Carolina. So you look at what they have retained and what Carolina's retaining in David Moore and the rest of the group. And it's not necessarily fair to compare Carolina's receiving core to Cincinnati. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to point at the fact that they have 2 premium receivers, and Carolina is hoping that Legette can be that down the road, and maybe Coker can develop into that. But there's still a glaring need there at wide receiver 1. And I do think that bringing back David Moore for one more year. I believe that's what the deal is going to be. There has not been any announcement as far as what the terms are as of this recording on Tuesday evening, but I don't imagine that they're signing David Moore to a multi-year deal. He did have a nice season, the best season he's had since he left Seattle originally for Carolina to come in and to be the number 3 receiver, but did not make the team, and then has been a journeyman the last couple of years, has been out of the league for a year, arrived back in Tampa the year prior when Dave Canales was there as the OC because of the relationship dating back to their time spent together in Seattle. He brought David Moore here, and Moore made the team. And when you look at Thielen missing 7 weeks, Deontay Johnson, that whole saga that happened here in Carolina, Coker dealing with injuries, Leggett dealing with injuries and missing time as well, David Moore had to step up in certain situations. And I thought he had a really nice season, especially based off of what the reasonable expectations should have been for a player who has not been in a receiver rotation as a top 3 guy since the pandemic in Seattle. He caught 32 passes for 351 yards and 3 touchdowns this past season, and that has rewarded him now to being back in Carolina. And he can also be someone who can return kicks for you as a special teams type of player. So I do think this is a logical move for Carolina to make. And when you look at the receiving core right now, Adam Thielen, Xavier Leggett, Jalen Coker, David Moore, I would say fairly confidently right now, all 4 of those guys will be on the roster. Obviously Thielen, obviously Leggett, obviously Coker, and TBD on Moore dependent upon what they do the rest of free agency and, of course, what they do in the draft next month in Green Bay. But I would say right now he's probably going to be okay if they want to bring him back because, well, they brought him back. But you look at the numbers last year and what he was able to do stepping up when needed. Dan Chisena's back. Cool. Dax Milne. Cool. He's here. He played at BYU. Only reason I know who that is. TJ Luther. Apologies again to him and his family. No idea who that is. Bryce Tremaine apparently went to Stanford. Smart guy. Still playing football and not really going to make the team. How smart? Okay, I don't want to be offensive, but like, what are we doing here? Okay, cool. Bryce Tremaine, he's here. Awesome. So that's your receiving core in Carolina right now. Point to me who of that eightsome is concerning. Maybe we get down the road. I know there's a lot of people like Coker. Moore, no. Thielen, once upon a time. Chisena, Milne, Luther, Tremaine, no. So they have to get better there. And I do think, though, they have a strong foundation with Adam coming back for another year and likely maybe his last season in the NFL. Xavier going into his second year. Hopefully he does not miss too much time this offseason as it's critical towards his development and for the Panthers' offensive growth that he's able to get out there as he recovers from that foot injury. Jalen Coker coming back. David Moore. Like those 4, it's great to have that foundation, much better than what the Panthers had really, I mean, a couple weeks ago, this time a year ago in 2024. So now you can add another piece to that, hopefully, and that can help Bryce out and not neglect the offense, which Dan Morgan said he wouldn't do. And he certainly has not done that as they have brought back David Moore. They have signed Rico Dowdle as the backup and hell, maybe a 1A, 1B situation with Chuba Hubbard, who they also paid big money to in the middle of last season. They brought back the entirety of the offensive line, still pinching myself that Brady Christensen still a Carolina Panther. Did not expect that to happen, but it feels very clear to me at this point in time that if Carolina is going to address the wide receiver position in any sort of a big way, it's going to happen in the draft. There are still names out there like Amari Cooper, like Stephon Diggs, like Keenan Allen, who respectfully, all these guys are has-beens. They're more of names than actual players at this point in time in their career. And if Carolina wants to be able to have a top-tier receiver, it's either going to be Leggett developing to that, which I'm very doubtful of at this point in time, or them going to the draft this year and hopefully getting the right player, or maybe having to wait until next off season, depending upon who's available, and maybe looking at the draft in 2026. So to me, clearly, if they're going to try to address wide receiver in any sort of meaningful way, it's going to have to happen 6 weeks from now in Green Bay at the NFL draft. So it just depends on when. Do they want to do it at 8? Do they want to do it at 57? Or are they waiting all the way until 74 to get their wide receiver? We'll talk about with Daniel Jeremiah and what Mel Kiper Jr. had to say on their latest mock drafts on Tuesday here later on the show. But I do want to go back and update my offseason to-do list, something I do every single offseason here on Locked On Panthers. The Panthers have checked off a ton of boxes as we're past the first and probably second wave of free agency at this point in time. But there's still areas and boxes that are left unchecked as they head into the draft season. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Panthers are through the first week of free agency and maybe done with free agency overall as far as adding key pieces to the roster that weren't here a year ago. And I think so far they've done a really good job of rebuilding that defensive line, or at least building around Derek Brown, who's coming off of a season where he missed 16 games due to a torn meniscus. Now he comes back as a top 5 defensive tackle. You add Turk Wharton next to him, Bobby Brown III's next to him. Shai Tuttle's in a more reduced role, which is what's more befitting of his stature at this point in time in the NFL on this roster. Ashawn Robinson, who was the best defensive tackle last year, he's back. LeBron Ray, okay. He's got experience for the last 2 years. He's also here. So feel good about where that group is at this point in time. Maybe they could add somebody in the draft, and Mel Kiper Jr. thinks that may be what Carolina should do. We'll get to that again momentarily here on the show. But so far, I like what they've added defensively. Still need to see it first before we're totally buying in to what this team hopefully and potentially can be in 2025. But overall, a good start to how things have gone this offseason. And let's go back over my offseason to-do list, do a couple of updates throughout the offseason. First, talked about this back in February, I believe, or maybe even late January, and now talking about here in the middle of March, as we're going to solely focus on a draft starting on Monday, which will be 1 month away from the beginning of the 2024 or 2025. Wow, where am I at? NFL draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. All right. Offseason to-do list. Number one thing I had up there was to extend J.C. Horn. Could open up $9 million of cap space. You look at the situation with Brian Burns and how Carolina did not want to pay him, and then they had a massive hole there at edge rusher. Let's not do the same song and dance again with J.C. Horn. And we saw after Carolina decided we're good, I'm giving you $30 million per year, Brian. We're going to go ahead and trade you to the Giants and then use those picks to improve our roster and open up some cap space, be able to sign some guys on the offensive line to improve the overall team. And we talked about this back in January. Looking back at it, it looks like it was the right move very clearly, even though edge rushers still big old question mark there when looking at what that's going to be, not even just this season, but long-term, trying to identify someone to be a true replacement of Brian Burns. But they showed last year that they're not going to be the kind of organization like they had been with Scott Fitterer and with Matt Rule, where they're trading away cornerstone piece and Christian McCaffrey. They're moving on from DJ Moore as well when getting a quarterback, and that makes no damn sense at all. Why would you get rid of a wide receiver who could help out your rookie quarterback? Who knows? Scott Fitterer is no longer employed here in Carolina, and we got to move on. They had made a nasty habit of doing that, but then they signed Derek Brown to an extension that made him one of the top 5 highest paid defensive tackles in the NFL. And a year later, less than, they went out there and they made J.C. Horn at the time the highest paid defensive back in the history of the NFL, giving him $25 million per year. That only lasted a week, as on Monday, Derek Stingley Jr. down there in Houston got $30 million per year, which, wow, that cornerback market is going crazy. And Sauce Gardner hasn't even gotten paid just yet. And good thing Carolina got it done, because JC reset the market after Pat Surtain, who actually didn't. He was still 0.1, I guess $100,000 per year below what's his name? Jalen Ramsey's making down there in Miami. But either way, Carolina got ahead of it. Made sense. They extended JC, opened up $5 million in cap space, not 9. And now he's going to be here for the next 5 seasons as a Carolina Panther. Look at the structure. Pretty hard to get out of that unless they're going to trade him away, which hopefully that does not happen. I also wanted to see them, and this was not one of my top priorities, but I did want to see the Panthers re-sign Cade Mays. They've tendered him. I do not know whether he has signed that restricted free agency tender just yet, but he's back here going to compete to start at center with Austin Corbett, who was not on my to-do list, but he is back in Carolina. And Brady Christensen did not think that was going to happen. He could also compete, but I'm expecting that to be Cade, and it would be awesome. Maybe if Brady came back, they will let him have an opportunity at that job. Re-signing Mike Jackson, needed to see it happen. He had a really nice year, again, based off of expectations, where he was dealing with an injury up in Seattle. We talked about this last week. Really thought that maybe his career was going to be over. He had bought a plot of land. He was going to figure out what he was going to do for the rest of his life. And then Carolina, as he said, gave him a new lease on life. And he came over here, started and played in all 17 games, played 99% of the snaps, had a couple of interceptions, and was a really nice piece. And you got to think, like, if they had ended up with Dane Jackson being healthy throughout the season, and we still had a conversation. We're looking at guys like Lamar Jackson, DiCaprio Bootle, Deshaun Jameson as maybe being the number 3 corner, and wondering, like, is that really what Carolina's going to do here? Does that make the most sense? And they still needed to add a veteran presence. We had this conversation throughout training camp in the preseason. So whether Dane Jackson stayed healthy or not, Mike Jackson made a lot of sense for Carolina. But once Dane went down, Mike was absolutely necessary, and he played so much better than I think any of us really could have expected. And it's not like we really even knew who he was. We were calling him Michael Jackson at first. He likes to go by Mike because obviously, well, there's another Michael Jackson, far more famous and more talented, at least what he did. But Mike Jackson, glad that he's here in Carolina, and glad that they have that number 2 corner spot shored up for, I think, at least the next 2 seasons. That would be 3 straight years of Mike Jackson and JC Horn there. Nice stability for Carolina potentially moving forward. Obviously, knock on wood. Re-signing Tommy Tremble. I felt for a long time that it would make sense to bring back Tommy. He's not going to be a high-level pass catcher. He can be a secondary pass catcher as far as the tight end position goes, but you need somebody above him to fulfill that role that's been missing for years now in Carolina. But it looks like JT Sanders is finally a replacement of Greg Olsen, but JT has a long ways to go in some of the other tight end stuff like blocking, which Tommy Tremble does a really good job at. I don't care what PFF says. Like, the guy's a good run blocker. Him coming back on a 2-year deal, love to see that, wanted to see it, and it makes sense. Signing a backup quarterback, I did not make it specific. I was cool with Andy Dalton. I was cool maybe going younger and bringing in somebody like that, not to be competition, but just let's have a younger backup who can maybe be here for a couple of years. But they kept Andy, and it works out. 2-year deal. You know, if you need him to go in there for at least 1 week, you can win with him. So Andy Dalton backing up Bryce Young, being a mentor in that room, reliable backup. Like to see that. Signing a veteran backup running back. And boy, did they blow me out of the water when they signed Rico Dowdle, coming off a 1,000-yard rushing season, a career of the year in Dallas. And apparently Cowboy fans are pissed off that he is no longer there. And instead, Javonte Williams, who is actually someone that I had mentioned. And now, yeah, I mean, I'm wearing a North Carolina shirt, so that's a big reason he's from here. And, you know, loved him at Carolina. But still, I want to see them get somebody in. Well, they got, I think, the best backup you could have hoped for, Enrico Dowdle, and maybe Smash and Dash Part 2 or 2.0, whichever one you want to call it, is back on this upcoming season in Carolina, even with Jonathan Brooks likely sidelined for the majority, if not all, of 2025. And then some deals they need to figure out as far as cutting guys. I wanted them to cut Miles Sanders. I wasn't even thinking about reworking. I came around on, okay, keep him around because Jonathan Brooks is going to miss a lot of time. But once Miles is not willing to come to terms with Carolina on a pay cut, they cut him, saved $5.2 million. Made sense. They reworked the deal. I wanted to see them cut Shy Tuttle, but instead they reworked it. And actually, I don't think they saved any salary cap money. Come to think about it when looking at overthecap.com, but he did take a $3 million pay cut, and I guess I probably should open up cap space, but he's back in Carolina, which I come around to and thought that was the best situation. Dane Jackson, there was no conversation. Cut him. They did that. $3.35 million saved. I wanted to see them do 2 things for sure. Free agency. One was acquire a safety. 2 is acquired defensive tackle, and probably number 1, actually, in my heart, was defensive tackle, which they were able to do. And it wasn't just one. And we thought it was going to be a massive signing there for a minute in Milton Williams, who got $26 million per year, which is still crazy, from New England. Instead, he didn't come to Carolina, well, which is unfortunate. But the Carolina Panthers used that money to go out there and assign Treshaun Turk Wharton from Kansas City, who can be an edge rusher from the interior and maybe on the outside on the edge if need be, with the hand in the dirt. And also were able to get a needed run stopper in Bobby Brown III as a new addition here in Carolina. So happy that they were able to do that, not just get 1, but get 2 that can come in and rotate around Derek Brown and elevate what that group was. And when you can't stop the run, it's just really tough to watch a defensive team and have respect for that defense. But now I think that should be certainly improved coming up this season. And in acquiring a safety, we talked about Javon Holland. We talked about Trevon Moore. We talked about a lot of guys. Really, Moorig and Holland were the 2 that made the most sense for Carolina. And they went out there and got Trevon Moore from the Vegas Raiders. So glad they got all that worked out. So those are the things that have been checked off. Things they have not done. Extend Taylor Moton. That would potentially open up nearly $13 million cap space. They're not going to do that. So that's a box that's not going to be checked. Signing Eddie Pinheiro to a new deal right now. Panthers have Matthew Wright as their kicker. They may be looking at some rookies. Eddie's still available. And Dan Morgan did say that they would not close the door there. They'd let Eddie test the market. And the market's been open for over a week now. And nothing's happened as far as Eddie Pinheiro. So maybe his asking price will come down. He'll come back to Carolina. And then moving forward, I guess we'll sticking with free agency. I want to see them sign a number 1 wide receiver. Tee Higgins, he's staying in Cincinnati. Chris Godwin, well, he's staying in Tampa Bay. And everybody else, like Cooper Kupp, that was never even going to happen. And now Carolina is sitting here and focusing, I think, probably on the draft class and maybe adding someone at 8, maybe 57, maybe 74. We'll see. But looking ahead, draft an edge rusher. And right now, in my opinion, Jalen Walker, that's the guy. Draft a corner. Somebody probably there on day 2. Talk about that with Damian Parson. Brought up Siobhan Ravel there at ECU. Could make sense. I know he's coming off a torn ACL, but could be back, I would think, ready to go, as it happened a lot earlier than Jonathan Brooks's did. But I know there's probably some scar tissue there for Panther fans and not wanting to do that again. And then exercise 5th-year option on Ike Ekwonu, or maybe they'll extend him. Dan Morgan's kind of pointed to that they will exercise the option, and they've also kind of talked about maybe they'll just extend him. But Ike will be around for a couple of years, I do think, in Carolina. So those are the remaining things on the offseason to-do list. We'll get past the draft, and we'll update it once we get to that point in time, or if Panthers make some significant moves, maybe that will happen. But probably we're going to be back in May bringing up all the things that they did or did not do this offseason. It's mock draft season, of course, here in the NFL, as we're counting down today to the 2025 NFL draft up there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Mel Kiper Jr. put out his mock draft 3.0, maybe just second one, but whatever. He put out a mock draft on Tuesday, and Daniel Jeremiah put out his mock draft 3.0. We'll go over what those guys had to say and what they think is best for Carolina at 8 here in just a moment on the Locked On Panthers.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
We are almost, 6 weeks away and a day from the beginning of the 2024 NFL draft up there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, I'm ready to get it going, man. I'm ready to get into the draft season. We're going to officially, on Monday, we're no longer going to focus on free agency. We're diving in head first, y'all. Off the diving board, going to do it, maybe backwards. I don't care. We're talking all about the draft. I'll give you on Monday my initial thoughts on what Carolina should be focused on when it comes to the NFL draft. And I'm going to try to stack guests throughout the draft season because I can only say so much about the draft as one person. But, of course, mailbag, that will be your chance to ask me a bunch of draft questions. Go ahead. get them in for this upcoming Friday. We can go ahead and start right then and there. I don't want to necessarily give up too much what I want to say on Monday, but we can start talking about it then. If you have any thoughts over on free agency, those will still go ahead of the draft questions on this upcoming mailbag, but mailbag starting next Friday on the 28th. All draft all the time. So should be a fun couple of weeks leading up to the 2025 NFL draft up there in Green Bay. And speaking of the draft, that means mock drafts are out there. And yes, I'll be doing another mock draft. I did one last year. I'll do another one again this year and do a whole show talking about my selections and my thought process, if I have any thoughts at all, to why I made those decisions for Carolina. But let's get into what Mel Kiper Jr. He's been doing this for a long time, and also what Daniel Jeremiah had to say as far as their mock drafts that came out on Tuesday on ESPN and the NFL Network, or I guess NFL.com, respectively. So at eighth overall, Mel Kiper Jr. currently has Carolina taking Jalen Walker, linebacker from Georgia, Salisbury native, and right now, my choice at 8th overall for the Carolina Panthers, just looking at what they've done during free agency. I think defensive tackle, they're good. Linebacker, probably good right now. They could draft one for the future, but I wouldn't think that's where they're going to go. Corner could make sense. I don't know if they are going to be able to take a corner there at 8 as looking at this right now. Travis Hunter is off the board. But Will Johnson, who people have asked me about potentially at 8, he is on the board when Mel Kiper Jr. has Carolina taking Jalen Walker there. And now what he did say as far as Jalen Walker coming to Carolina, he said Carolina's biggest weakness last season was the defense. Duh. It allowed 6.0 yards per play and surrendered 31.4 points per game, which we now know is the worst in the history of the National Football League. Those league worst numbers, not just league worst, record numbers, were clearly on Panthers general manager Dan Morgan's mind during free agency when the team inked Trevon Moehrig, Tershawn Wharton, Pat Jones II, and Christian Roseboom, but Morgan shouldn't stop there. Drafting Walker would give Carolina a versatile defender who can play off-ball linebacker, where I have him ranked, or on the edge, and that's where Mel has him ranked. He does not have him ranked as an edge player. He had 62 tackles and 6.5 sacks in 2024, and his sideline-to-sideline speed and first-step burst are really an awesome trait. He won the Butkus Award for the best linebacker. I think actually the most outstanding linebacker is technically the term in college football last year. Had 10 tackles for loss as well, leading Georgia. And apparently his leadership is one of the noted things about him. And just every time I talk about or read more about him, when I talk about him with other people, it just is so simple as far as the pick that needs to be made for Carolina. When you think about the cultural fit, like great days from here, but they need a guy who can be versatile, who can play off-ball linebacker, which they're going to need down the road because after the season, Roseboom and Jewell both could be gone. And I'm guessing they're probably both going to be gone. Maybe, I don't know. But if they draft Jalen Walker, go ahead and leave after this upcoming year because then it can be Jalen and then Trevin Wallace. And then they have the versatility in the player where he can also come off the edge and be a good player there. Now, Mel Kiper apparently believes he's a better linebacker than he would be an edge rusher. Carolina just needs to have somebody who can be able to do both. And if that's who Jalen Walker is, that's really what's attracted me to him. I like that. He talked about his pro day last week that a lot of guys are versatile, but not all these guys do multiple things well. He's like, I can do multiple things well, and love that confidence. So would love to see that be the pick right now. My mind could change. We got a long way to go. Y'all know, I mean, I talked about Bryce Young was the right pick, and then came draft day. I was like, screw it. Whatever. They're going to pick him anyways. Why not just say this, put it on the record? I was like, go ahead, take Anthony Richardson. If you're really all about all-star coaching staff and you're going to build this quarterback, why not take the best athlete? And that's who he is. And while things have not worked out in Indianapolis, and I don't think it's necessarily all on him. So, my mind can change. And I know that upset people by me doing that. Calm down. It's not that big of a deal. I have to do a daily podcast, guys. You do this every day, and then you come back and talk to me about how easy it is to be able to come up with a new opinion about the same freaking topic. But either way, looking over at Daniel Jeremiah, his 3.0 draft, he has Carolina taking Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. And prior to free agency, yeah, okay, makes sense. But when you sign Bobby Brown III to a 3-year deal, when you sign Turk Wharton to a 3-year deal, when you have Derek Brown on a top 5 defensive tackle deal, and that is starting this year, the real money in that deal, and 4 more years of it, And you also have Ashawn Robinson around for another year. And Shai Tuttle's here for this. I mean, Ashawn after this year has more time. Shai Tuttle's back for a final season. I mean, it's never a bad thing to go out there and add to the defensive interior. I just don't look at it as a need. And maybe he would be best player available. Maybe, maybe not. But that's one that I don't necessarily agree with at this point in time. And looking at it, he does have Jalen Walker going off the board to Jacksonville with pick number 5. And that would team him up with a former Georgia player in Siobhan Walker, who I did not believe he played with when during his time in Athens, and he would be with Josh Hines Allen as well. The Jags defense was equally bad, but they have pass rushers. They have Walker. They have Hines Allen. Carolina doesn't have that right now. So at 8, he's got them, I guess, going BPA. And he says the Panthers came up a little short in their pursuit of Milton Williams in free agency. I mean, they didn't come up short. They just were smart, in my opinion. But they get another chance to bolster the interior defensive line here. Graham would be a key addition for a defense that ranked last in yards and points allowed last season. And again, this came out on Tuesday. That's surprising to me that is his selection. Now, understand this. Guys like Daniel Jeremiah, guys like Mel Kiper Jr., Matt Miller, Jordan Reed, those guys, when they do these, it's a lot of sourced information. When it's Joe Blow 99 on Twitter or Blue Sky doing it, they don't know anything. And there's plenty of guys who are doing it that are out there who don't know. Like, I guess maybe that's what he's hearing. I wouldn't be surprised, because that is certainly interesting if that is where Carolina at least has their head at. But also, based off of this, and comparing it to Mel's, Jalen Walker's already gone in the top 5. If he's there at 8 and they're going BPA and also looking at need, got to be Jalen Walker, no? We'll see. Plenty of time to talk about it here on Locked On Panthers. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to at me or DM me over on Twitter and Blue Sky to get your questions in for Friday's weekly Friday mailbag here on the show. At me, DM me, whatever you got to do to get those questions in. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.